she spoke to me about astrology since I was very young. So I know my chart very well. And it's been something that I've pondered often, and have had at different points in time a real strong connection to, with the caveat that because the system of knowledge came from my mother, there were times where I also resisted kind of her ways when they felt too predictive, or if I just wasn't welcoming at the time to hear her talk about me or my relationships or my children, through the lens of my mother and astrology. My mom has since passed about 8 months ago, and one of the beautiful things that happened and coalesced with Jeffrey was that we realized how interested we were, and we started talking a lot more, and a lot of my own guards about it have dropped. And so I've kind of realized that I am a student of astrology.
I love that. I love that through the lens of your mother was sort of part of the resistance, because nobody wants to be told anything from their parents at all, including their fate and their fortune, because that's another something that you kind of said in there. It seemed like you didn't like the deterministic aspect of astrology. Yeah. So I'm actually a traditional Hellenistic astrologer, and so everything, this is fate. Like when I look at it, it is what it is. It's concrete. I'm a practicing stoic, so very fate and deterministic. I can't tell you what you're going to have for breakfast. You still have the choice to do that, but there are large scale themes, patterns, archetypal energy that is imbued into our human experience, this go around, if you believe that. So I fully believe that there are things that no matter what you do, it's not going to miss you. No matter which way you go, it's going to find you somehow. So those are things that I can see within a chart. And I think sometimes that scares people. It's easier to believe in nothing than to believe in something. And I put all of my eggs in the basket of fate. So that's sort of where I am just with astrology and stoicism in general.
Mm-hmm.
So Jeff, what about you then? Where are you at in the astrological realm?
Yeah, know enough to feel connected to it. I've had people speak to my experience with astrology or kind of say things that suddenly, that starts making sense. I start resonating with it. Particularly the first acknowledgement I had that kind of made me feel seen through the astrological lens was a housemate when I was in Chinese medical school saying basically like, oh, Moon, Mars, and in the sixth house, and started talking about the challenge of feeling, of emotions and action and those tensions there. And I was like, yeah, I absolutely feel that way all the time. And it's right there in my chart. Okay. And then, little bits here, little bits there over the years.
Yeah. And the Piscean urge to, be up here and ethereal in action and not being able to kind of ground those actions and those emotions and do it in a way that's, harmonious, because you do have a Libra rising, as I do. So harmony is everything for us. Everything we do is harmony driven,
Yeah.
We're both also malefic ruled. You are ruled by Saturn. I am ruled by Mars. And it's hard to sometimes be a malefic person when you have your aspirations, which is your rising sign. Your rising sign isn't just your persona or a mask. It is literally the thing you are aspiring, ascending towards, those ideals in life. So you and I are both aspiring towards Libran ideals, which is harmony, beauty, truth, bohemian type things. We're really looking to get to that point. And it can be hard when you have malefic planets ruling you, because malefic planets don't, that's not always their thing. It's never their thing, really. So,
I love it. I love how you're already dropping in and we're already in the podcast zone. So let me make it official. Dalanah Smith, welcome to the How Humans Work podcast. I'm so glad to have you here today.
Great to be here. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. And I want to welcome my co-host and friend, deep brother, Tobin Mayell. Tobin, welcome to the podcast. Glad to have you here as well.
Hello. Thank you.
So you've already started laying out some of the frames that you feel in your relationship and your work with astrology. And for those who are joining us today, thank you for being here. And I also just want to let people know we're starting season 4, which is around this idea of systems of knowledge, how we have different knowledges we can rely on to understand our human experience and our human nature. And by chance or fate, I found Dalanah this podcast, Moon Matters podcast, which I totally love. If you're a student of astrology or interested in astrology, I highly recommend it. Very accessible. And you have this beautiful way of weaving the myth, the story, the gods, the goddesses, and those features in a way that really speaks to me, because I love that dimension of the mythology of it all. And so I guess really, how did you find yourself, as you said in one of your podcasts, moving from kind of a modern sense of astrology to a deeper Hellenistic or a fate-driven relationship with astrology? How'd that come about for you?
Yeah, I think most people start modern because we're in a modern world. That's just kind of how it is. Not everybody's like steeped in ancient wisdom, from the get. So for me, I'm a very traditionally driven person. I like foundations. For the astrologically fluent people, my Saturn is in Capricorn, which is domiciled. It really wants to uphold tradition. It wants to go back to those archetypal sort of beginnings and see where these myths, these stories, why they originate so strongly within everyone, the human psyche, why the human psyche is so attached to these things. I also have a Jungian sort of spin to me a lot of the time. And I think the modern significations, while they're not wrong, no system is wrong by any means, but I really resonate with upholding those foundational studies, the foundational art of astrology, and really looking at just the beginning. I also like palmistry is actually where I started everything. So in the palm, you have the 7 planets as well. And also those are the 7 visible planets that you can see. So traditional astrology just really made sense to me. I can see those. I can work with those. They're within my hand. These are the 7 sages, the 7 archetypes that I think really people are able to connect with. Not that Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto are bad or not right, or that the modern rulerships are wrong. It's just that these traditional ones, when you get really deep into the system, it makes a lot of sense. And also from an occult sense, like an occult magic sense, which I did for a small period of time, it also just kind of all flows together. So traditional astrology, it's just traditional, it's timeless. So that's why I kind of gravitated more towards that.
Yeah. So it's in your nature, and you tie that back to the astrological system, that's the Saturnian kind of Capricorn. What are the foundations? Which is like one of the reads, right? So part of the thing I love about what I understand about astrology, it gives us ways of reading and dimensions of understanding experience and human experience with these 12 archetypes, or maybe 7 if I understand that correctly. I'm not sure I understand that distinction. So
with the planets, there's 7 planets and 12 signs.
Okay, so there's still this 12 signs in the Hellenistic style. Great, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah. So so you've been using the tools and using the system to help you understand, weave, consult with people, and understand your I guess the events and experiences of life, how life unfolds, the fates of it. So talk a little bit more about that dimension of your understanding of astrology and how you work with it.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I'm a practicing Stoic. I practice Stoic ideals. I feel like I've been a Stoic. I feel like I've truly been my entire life. I've always been, from a very young age, been, if I perceive something this way, well, then it is this way. If I want something to be a preferable experience, then it will be one. And I try to also stay away from polarizing words like good and bad when I'm doing readings. We have preferred human experiences and we have unpreferred human experiences. Even in the sense of a malefic planet and a benefic planet, they may do good or bad things in our lives, but really it's just we don't prefer the things that Mars and Saturn does. We prefer, as human beings in our experience here, what Jupiter and Venus do, because they are like, the fun, the nice, the fun, the party planets, so to speak, whereas Mars and Saturn bring things that we don't like in the human experience. So using astrology through a stoic lens is just innate to me. I see it, it's someone's fate. And you can also look at it through a psyche kind of portion, where you can do psychological astrology with traditional meanings and significations. But I really do look at it as this is an overarching energy, an overarching fate that is happening to a person. And yes, those events will shape the psyche and it will shape the person that you are. But I can really see in someone's chart a lot of things that are going to happen in their life and how it is going to impact them overall.
So is that predictive? Is that in
I
a
would say
sense?
it's divinatory.
Okay.
Yeah, it can be.
Yeah.
I try not to divine too much, because I always tell people, yeah, I know you based off of your chart, but I would be so pompous to think that I know exactly the thousands of ways a signification is going to play out, and I don't believe that. I practice astrology. I practice Stoicism. I have a hard time labeling myself as what I actually am, though. I don't like to say that I'm a diviner or that I can tell your future in any way. I'm more so just a touchstone for the human experience. I'm someone where people happen upon me when they need validation, confirmation, or just a guiding hand to put them in the right direction.
Tobin, you got something here?
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in and say that I really like the idea of expressing now let me put it a different way, not expressing, but the way in which we can engage our fate through understanding the ways that we engage life and the way that we see ourselves and our place in our own narrative. And because we've been talking about systems of knowledge, I like the idea that you can use astrology as a lens to see yourself and see your relationships more clearly. And instead of feeling subjugated or bullied or out of control about yourself, you could delve in and find agency and engage your fate or your destiny in a way that gives you agency. I like that idea a lot. I feel very aligned with that idea hearing you speak about it.
Absolutely. It's all about having autonomy to accept what we're given and work with it in a way. We're not trying to run from it. We're trying to embrace it. If you're like me and you have a detrimental Mercury, I always tell people a planet in detriment isn't bad. I have a detrimental Mercury and I have a podcast. I'm a writer. You work with it, you understand it. And for your Mars Moon conjunction, okay, so maybe you have volatile emotions at times. It's not an excuse. It's an awareness thing. It's a reason to work on it. It's showing you, it's that mirror, Tobin, like you kind of said. It's a mirror to, okay, I'm getting to look at my fate and I can dance with it freely within the confines of what's going to happen regardless. It's teaching you how to react to what kind of your strand of fate has woven for you.
Can I say one other thing about that?
Mm-hmm.
I really like the idea that we don't name something as good or bad, but we can call it beneficent or you said
benefic or malefic, yeah.
Benefic or malefic, or challenging. Mm-hmm. And when you see something in your life, whether it's astrology or not, that you become aware is a challenge, it may just take really owning it and acknowledging it in order to start working with it. And then you find out that there's quite a lot of beauty and significance in that challenge. I think that's one of the things that I really like about astrology, when I've allowed myself to really embrace something that looks on the face of it very difficult. but then realized, because I'm older, there's a lot of places in my life where things that seemed really difficult have ended up being bountiful.
Yeah, and that's the thing about the malefics, especially Saturn. Saturn is the one that's putting pressure and pressure until something finally turns into a diamond. Saturn won't give you your boons outright by any means, and you must do a lot of work to get them, but they always do come with time. And yeah, so I think that's a really great way to look at it.
So I think that when it comes to predictive or divinatory or fate, there's the risk of fatalism, or that things feel predetermined, and that's not exactly my understanding of how it works. That it's gonna play out a very specific way with this astrological energies that are present. That it's more of, okay, here's the factors that are at play, and they're gonna have their say. Is that a good way for people to think about it, as rather than predetermined or fatalistic, that it's a conversation that's unfolding with certain energies in the room?
I think that's a really palatable way to say it to people. I think it's a very, very palatable way. It's a very Libran, harmonious way to present it to people, to say, this is an energy that you're going to work with. And instead of being like, yeah, Mars is coming, so there's going to be an accident, something is going to slice and dice. I'm very forward with those things. So I can be
say it your way then for us. Yeah, say it your way.
I think fate is going to find you. I think truly, if it's meant to happen, it's meant to happen. I've seen it in my own chart, and I don't tell anybody anything that I haven't experienced. Don't tell anybody to do something I haven't done. I've done quite a lot. I know I'm young, but I've done quite a lot of things, and I learned through experience, and I'm grateful for all of my experiences, because it allows me to tell people the story they need to hear. And I think that's the biggest thing, and why I like myths so much, because I can interject a myth into when I'm trying to interpret something for someone. But yeah, fate happens. And I know people don't like that, because they want their autonomy, and they want individualism, and they want choice. And that's great. You have the choice to accept it. You have the choice to look at it and say, that was unpreferred, but I accept it. That's your choice. Fate isn't your choice. You don't get to choose all of the things that happen to you, but you do get to choose how you react to it and how you respond to it, and whether or not you want to see it as an obstacle or an advantage. So that's what I would say. This is going to happen. Somebody's going to die. Someone's going to have a breakup. Something bad is going to happen. You might have to switch jobs. All of the array of things in the human experience that we don't like, but you can choose to see it as an opportunity, and that is your choice within the bounds of fate.
Oh, so good.
So agree.
So meaty. Like, oh, okay. All right. So I want to give the listeners and myself kind of the big perspective of fate. So in a certain way, fate is related to where the cosmological clock is at the moment one is born. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yes. Talk about that, just the shape of the wheel, the clock, the elements, the energies of what one's dealing with in their fate. Yeah.
Yeah. So in my world, as a traditional astrologer, you really are caring about 7 traditional planets. So you're going to have Venus, Mercury, Moon, Sun, Mars, Saturn, Jupiter. Those are kind of the big heavy hitters. And then also the ascendant. In traditional astrology, the ascendant is extremely important, because that sets up the whole chart. The whole cascade of the chart, all of the houses, then that's where all of the planets fall. So the ascendant is also very important. And those key players really sort of dictate, slightly to an extent, personality, especially the ascendant and how you present yourself. And then also just the happenings in life. The moon matters. The moon matters isn't just about the moon, it's unconscious. It's the subconscious world. It's that deep inner world. That's what Moon Matters is really trying to get to the heart of. So, but the moon, that is your inner world. That is, I also think it's like your weak point, your hot button. It's the thing that's going to set you off, because it's tender. It's below the surface. The sun, no matter what sun sign you have, even if you only have one placement, like Jeff, you only have, I believe, the sun. Yes, you only have the sun in Capricorn. That's it. So you might not always feel like a Capricorn. You might not always feel Capricornian in a lot of ways, but every
Yeah.
other placement has to flow through the sun. It's the sun is the ego identity, and ego is not a dirty word. People need to stop, thinking ego is bad,
Amen.
because
Amen.
ego is vitality. Ego is how we assert ourselves in the world. If you have no ego, how are you going to get through the world? You're either going to rely on id or super ego, and that's not a good place to be. That's not a good place to be.
Agree so much.
Fully agreed.
Yes, you don't want to be acting out of id, and you don't want to be acting out of super ego, because you're just going to get hurt all the time. So you need a strong ego to move through this world, and balanced. I would say also a balanced ego, knowing the shadows of oneself is very important. So the sun sign is really core to who we are, regardless of everything else. And I could say with your Mercury is going to be your intellectual mind. It's going to be how you talk with others. I think that's a pretty big signification just for people, how you talk. I'm a fast talker. I'm very, very fast. It's Sagittarius Mercury. You have it as well, Jeff. It's now, Tobin, I'm interested what your Mercury is, because you're very even. You're deliberate in how you deliver your words. So what is your Mercury?
It's in Virgo.
So it's domiciled. It's great. Love it. You have two detrimental Mercuries talking with one domiciled Mercury. So, yeah, because when you speak, I can just hear the deliberate way in which you even edit yourself as you're speaking, which is not bad. It's you being very cautious and deliberate with how you speak, because words have weight, and you know that, and they matter. So, yeah. So. I try. So yeah, your Saturn, that's going to show you where hardships are. Your Mars is going to show you where hardships are. Venus is going to show you where goodness. Same with Jupiter. Those are just the basic things that wherever they were in the cosmos at the time, bam. And people might think, oh, well, so everybody gets that. It's like, not quite. It's all going to be a little different, because then you start fine tuning things with aspects. And depending on where you were born, your ascendant can change in the time. That's why time is so important. It's, yes, Jeff, you and I both have a Libra rising. So people could be like, well, are you
something
similar?
I do want to
Maybe.
talk about? Yeah.
Yeah, like maybe we are, but it all depends on the placements within those houses and what houses are being lit up. You have 2 placements in the 6th house. I have none. It all shakes out very differently. So yes, where the planets are at the time you were born, that's kind of just the crux of fate in a way.
Yeah. And the thing for that as a amateur astrologist, the thing that kind of is curious for me is the kind of interlocking patterns of houses, planets, signs, and then the positioning and the relationship, that it's this very dynamic conversation taking place. Talk a little bit more about those 4 dimensions of the wheel, of the cosmological clock, of the print that is the cosmology at the moment of birth for any individual.
Yeah, so I know there's 12 signs, and even if you don't have a placement in a sign, like say you have no Cancer placements, that doesn't mean you don't have that energy within you. It's just all of those archetypes are within you. It's just which ones are the loudest. It's the same thing with the 12 Jungian archetypes. We have them all, but which one is the loudest? And I've actually overlaid the 12 Jungian archetypes over the chart and within the houses, and I've seen it, and it's all a nice, like you said, interlocking system. So the signs really kind of give you the flavor of things, the flavor of when the planets are in there, what are they kind of acting like. And some planets really like being in certain signs because it mixes with them. I keep using the words domicile and detriment. So for detrimental Mercuries, Mercury doesn't really like being in Sagittarius because it's a lot of foot and mouth disease. It's a lot of talking too fast. It's a lot of saying, your mind's going, but the thing's coming out. There's a very slim filter, if at all any. Whereas domiciled Mercury is going to be in Virgo or Gemini. And those are people that are Virgo is more of an editor. It's more of a thinker. It's more of, I'm going to tidy this up. And in Gemini, it's the con man. It's the one that can be real slick with words. So the signs really dictate the attitude that the planet gets to take on when it's there.
Yeah.
And what else did you want to know about? So signs,
well, that's good. I think that's great.
Okay.
And just to say that there's like benefits and tensions, places where things are at home and places where things are
Mm-hmm.
maybe out of their element, so to speak.
Truly out of
So
their
that's
element
all really,
sometimes.
sorry.
I said truly. That was like a pun. I like puns.
Yeah.
Out of their element.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. That's one of like the basic thing. A big part of astrology is like, it's an
I love the
elemental system.
elements. I love
Yeah.
it.
What do you love about the elements?
Oh, the elements, you could learn so much just based off that in general. So you and I both have, I did something recently where I was talking about like careers and life paths in astrology. So 2, 6, and 10, those are the houses of, in anybody's chart, of career, destiny, life path, money making. Everybody wants to get down on the capitalistic system. We live in a material world. We all have to be material girls. It's just how it is. We have to, whether we like it or not. So materialistic things aren't bad. They are literally part of the chart. It is the second house. And looking at that system, yours is in the element of water, much as mine is. So that tells me immediately you really care about connecting with people and changing people's lives. You truly care about having that one-on-one connection. Maybe it's even going to be a little bit of a spiritual path for you to take, whatever your job is. It needs to feel like it's spiritually fulfilling. It needs to feel like you're doing something maybe even a little out of the box, but at the same time, it needs to be, you care about work. Your chart, you definitely care about work, having moon and Mars both in the 6th house. What the service that you give to other people has to fulfill you emotionally. You have to be emotionally fulfilled at work, or else it's not worth it. Money's great, but at the end of the day, it's about the emotional fulfillment for the water paths. Is that a good read?
It is a good read. It's a totally great read. Tobin, it's a good read.
Yeah, what I love is that, I've known you, Jeff, for 24 years.
Yeah.
And so to hear your take on some of the basics of his chart and have it feel so true, so just to my perception of Jeff is really wonderful.
So I think we have a good sense of just some of the basics of how astrology works and where you're coming from. And I think continuing to dive in, if it's okay, to keep looking at the conversation on my chart, what you see, what you're thinking. And then I want to move. Maybe I should tell this dream too. I'm not sure when I should tell this dream, because I think it should be part of the. Okay, great. Because I really do.
I've been polite. I've been so polite and not asking, but I've been so curious.
Okay, all right. So the backstory of how we're doing this podcast is, I had a dream probably 3 months ago, and in the dream, I was in this house. There was a lot of stuff going on, and one of my teachers and one of Tobin's teachers, a man named Michael Mead, probably my most popular figure in my dreams, shows up repetitively. But he's there, and he's on the back porch talking to a woman, and I don't want to interrupt, but he says to me, "Hey, I think it's time for you to turn your project in. You got to turn your project in." And I'm like, "Oh, I have a project I'm working on that I need to turn in, like a class." And he says, "I want to suggest the title of Eros Responsible Craving." I'm like, "That's not what I'm working on." And then I kind of wake up after the dream does the rest of its dream, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I think I am working on Eros Responsible Craving." So that morning I got up and I'm like, I need to revisit the Eros and Psyche story. And so I started looking through all the podcasts I could find that had Eros and Psyche stories. And almost all of them sucked badly, except yours. Yours was great. I loved it. And I was like, okay, that's amazing. This is cool. First, I loved your storytelling and your passion for it and the way you used the myth to kind of bring and highlight, but also this kind of secondary aspect that Tobin and I started exploring, which is never really thought about, but asteroid placements and these other kind of not unfamiliar aspects of understanding one's fate and one's nature. So that's the dream that led me to your podcast, that led me to this conversation.
I love that. Eros, when I get into my, I'll say, like, I do like mini series on things. When I get into them, I feel like I'm steeped in the energy of the thing that I'm working with, because I am so big on mythos and understanding it from that archetypal level. So I'm glad that it resonated. I'm glad that you like my storytelling, because I've always been a big fan of Anansi, which is like the god of storytelling. He's like a little spider god. And I've ever since I was very, very little, obsessed. And so Anansi, Baba Yaga, all of that is like deep within me.
Yeah. Before we get into the dream and the astrology part, what was the first story in your life that started speaking to you, or you knew that stories were a part of your path?
I would say when I like had figured, for some reason, when in my like elementary school, we watched this thing on Anansi, and I don't know why. It was like a Denzel Washington narrated like thing about Anansi, and he was a storyteller, and I was enamored with it. And then I remember having like a little stuffed like Pegasus as a kid, and I was just very much always surrounded by these types of things, and I really, really liked them. So
and that makes sense in your chart. With what aspects? Like when you came to understand your nature and your fate, where do you see that in your chart?
So the ruler of my chart is, much like your chart, is in the 9th house. And the 9th house is all about spirituality. It's about religion. It's about your morals, ethics, beliefs, your complex mind. The 3rd house is your day-to-day mind, and the 9th house is your complex mind. It's these big philosophical questions. I also have a ton of Sagittarius energy. So again, it's very much the walking philosopher of just questioning things. And I remember in one of my work interviews or like work like reviews at the end of the year, one of the positives and negatives about me was that I was philosophical. So it's
good.
So I just always ask those big questions, and I like to make people think and go there about life.
Yeah, no, you do. And I mean, again, the Moon Matters podcast is so great. And I actually thought, I don't know how you edit, but I thought, God, she edits out all the silences. And then now I'm like, no, she just has this Sagittarius Mercury that just kind of keeps going. I'm like, this is impressive. I love the way you're just able to keep flowing from idea to idea.
And
so
that's
definitely
something that I've always felt is like it just drops in. This is where like more little woo side of me comes into play, where I feel like sometimes it's not me actually, like I'm like a speaker box for whatever is coming out. And that's why I say sometimes the story that needs to be told, it just gets told through me.
Yeah, no, I feel that in my acupuncture practice and the years of working with people too, that there's an intuitive thing that's happening all the time. But I like that, and I do want to hear what you have to say about my chart. But I want to go a little bit deeper with this idea of these 12 things that come through us, and it's sometimes allowing room for things that we don't necessarily know, or our patterns of nature to arise. And one of my curiosities about your own development, as you've gotten into this kind of fated understanding of, and this archetypal understanding of experience, how that shifts your perception versus the kind of simple like, oh, I'm doing this, or I thought this, or I don't like this, to a kind of a different read of energies or currents flowing maybe through you, society, and other people that you work with or in your life.
So
does that question make sense? Yeah,
no.
yeah. That question doesn't make sense. Okay.
Was Sagittarius Mercury?
Two Sagittarius Mercury's trying to understand each other. So are you saying you want me like how I look at like the world? Is that what you're asking?
Yes. Okay. How because you're talking about things flowing through you that aren't you. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's kind of like an archetypal energy or a current that, and given the permission to think astrologically, given the permission to like depersonalize a lot of what's unfolding in one's fate, that there's room to see the flow of time differently and the experience of time. So yeah, talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So there's two answers to that. One is my husband has a thing called, I go into like the wizard state. It's like a very, meditative type state where I'm just talking and flowing and things. I'm in, it's what you would actually call, what is that? Not a Zen. Oh, Stephen Coulter.
Trance?
He had something. No. Flow state. Yes. Flow state. Thank you, Tobin. It's a flow state and you can do that with athletics. You can do a flow state with anything. And I tend to get into a flow state when I'm getting into my like philosophical ramblings. So it just comes
Love
out.
it.
So there's that. And it's more meditative and, practicing just being aware, practicing awareness, grounding, meditation, all of those things help people get into a flow state, the be here now, mentality of things. The second thing is that I was actually a scientist for like the first, decade of my real career. And I think that has allowed me to view the world in a non-biased lens, because as a scientist, you have to be non-biased. You're looking at things as a third party sort of tester for organic microbial pesticides. So I didn't care about results. It really taught me to not have expectations of things, which is the crux of Stoicism, not having expectations and you won't be disappointed. Don't put expectations on people, things outside of your control. The only thing you should have expectations of is yourself, because it's the only thing you can control. So I think when it comes to astrology, I have my traditional teachings, which I rely on, and I believe in fate. I just had a student recently that was like, this is crazy. You write all this down in like a PowerPoint beforehand and you just go into it. I'm like, yes, because I believe it, because I know it's true, because I've studied it, I've seen it. So I don't have to worry about, being wrong, because fate's not wrong. It's just kind of there. So I'm not biased in that. I just look at the textbook of what this thing means, and I look at the human experience as it is in modern day and kind of smash those significations together. So when I read someone's chart, it's kind of easy to not be biased. I just go with what I know is true of these placements.
Tobin, you have a follow-up?
Okay. Yeah, I gotta. I want to just bring in and see where you go with this. So the first time that my mother handed me a book about the moon's nodes, which is all about fate and where you're, as I see it, where you're pointed and where you came from.
Okay.
And the first time that book was in my hands, I was quite a bit younger, and I remember being kind of shocked at how what was expressed. I think it was Martin Schulman's book. Remember the title?
Karmic Astrology? Yeah.
That's it. Kind of shocked at how relevant it felt, and at the same time, super exposed. And there were parts of each of the South Node and North Node's parts that were hard to digest, but felt true. And then years went by, and I looked at it again, and it morphed, or it shifted. And now there were parts that maybe were difficult before that were now easier to accept, having had more life experience. And then other places where I felt vulnerable again. It was like, oof, if this is true, and yes, it does feel true, what am I going to do? And there's more to say, but I just wanted to start the conversation there, because Jeff and I have been talking a lot about both the moon and the moon's nodes, and know that you have lots to say about this. I'll be there.
Lunar nodes, love them. It sounds like you got the modern significations of them, because in modern astrology, it's very where you're going, where you came from. This one's shaped like a door and it's the door you're walking through. It's very much that. Traditional astrology, it's a little different. So traditional astrology is a great, great story myth that goes along with the lunar nodes. And basically it's Rahu and Ketu. Rahu is the north node, Ketu is the south node. The big story with this, how did this dragon become just a head and a tail? Because north node is the head of the dragon, south node is the tail of the dragon. It's said that there was this guy, and he's like, hey, I'm going to go steal an immortality potion from the gods. I'm going to go steal this. I'm going to go drink it. And basically, he did this. He's starting to take the first sip of it, and the gods caught him. They beheaded him, but while they beheaded him, a drop did land within his mouth. So then he became immortal. So but he was severed head and body. So head of the dragon, tail of the dragon. And the head of the dragon, Rahu, the north node, is all logic. There is no heart, because at the neck. Now, Rahu consumes and consumes and consumes, because there is no stomach to fill. So the head of the dragon is insatiable. And the tail of the dragon excretes, and it's all heart. It's all heart. There's no head. There's nothing to think. So the tail of the dragon, Ketu, the south node, is all about just kind of your heart. And yes, a little bit what you intuitively know in your heart, but also it's very draining. It's emotional, and we know emotions can be draining, especially in the human experience. So it's very, very draining, and it's just the bottom keeps falling out. It's like you have a leak. No matter how much you put in, it just keeps, the bottom keeps falling out. Now, the only time I care about anything with Rahu and Ketu in traditional astrology is when I see a conjunction. And even when, which a conjunction for everybody is just when a planet is roughly, I like tight orbs because tight orbs means loud conversations in astrology. So I would say I would give the lunar nodes an orb of 8 degrees. So if you have a planet within 8 degrees of a lunar node, I would say it's important. Today, yes, we do. Jeff's chart actually has this. So
yeah,
we're going to talk
let's get
about
into
that.
it.
I'm going to,
great.
Yeah. So, and you can also, if you don't have it natally, you should look at transits. So if you don't have a natal conjunction with the north or south node, you want to watch during transits. And if you know, oh, my south node is in Cancer, during Cancer season or Cancer transits, you want to watch when things go over the south node because it might drain them. And that's all in traditional astrology. That's all they do. Rahu increases and Ketu decreases. It's as simple as that. But we're going to get into what that means. So Jeff, you have actually Venus conjunct Rahu in the 5th house. Now, Venus in the 5th house alone is in its joy. It loves being there. A planet in its joy is almost better than being in domicile, in my opinion. It loves to be there because the 5th house is all about Venusian ideals, sex, pleasure, creativity, children, all of it. So when I would see someone with Venus conjunct Rahu, that's an insatiable lover. That is someone who is insatiable in their appetite
straight
for
face.
all things. You don't have to keep straight. I'm going to call you out on this. This is someone who
it's
is
fate. I can't do
sensual.
anything about it. Yeah.
You recognize it and you see it because it could ruin your relationships. Being overly sensual, being overly desirous, it could be hard to contain that within the bounds of a relationship. That's what I would caution someone. Also, it is a benefic, so it increases the beneficence of that placement. So you are someone that's probably very active. You like sports, you like creativity, you like leisure, you like to indulge in all things Venusian. But it is an Aquarius. So since it's an Aquarius, you have to be a little offbeat. You have to be a little quirky about it. That's how Aquarius is. So that's just my quick and dirty read on when you have Venus conjunct Rahu. It is the insatiable lover, and it can be a lot to contain. You have to find the right person who also has that amount of desire for Venusian ideals.
Mm-hmm. No, it's super powerful. And the Rahu part, I mean, it's such a powerful and potent image of, I mean, I guess in Buddhism would be, the endlessness of desire, or the hungry ghosts that never get fulfilled, or those particular dynamics of psychology of overthinking or predictability or trying to figure things out. I'm not sure if that's exactly it, but I do have an interest in neuroscience and the brain and the modern social sciences and stress. So I kind of look at it a little bit at that, in those realms. But I would say, first of all, I just love the story. That's what I'm really trying to say. That story is very potent. It's a nice, interesting take on the North Node and South Node. And then personally, I'd say that's really on point for me. How do I live out my Venusian desires in a way that works for all of me? Yeah, it's great. Super great. What else you got? I know a couple of things I'm interested in my chart, but I'm just curious what you have on your mind.
Tell me what you're interested in. We'll let it unfold. What are you?
Yeah, great. In? So I like this thing that you talk about in terms of harmonic and dynamic aspects of the chart. And if I look at the dynamic aspects of my chart, places where I see tension or confusion, I would say one is everything's flipped, like you being Libra rising. Every house is an opposite sign. So everything is, in a sense, opposition to itself. And I don't know what to make of that. And you obviously have the same situation. I'm wondering what you make of it and what you advise people.
So I kind of threw that line of thinking out once I got into traditional astrology, because the ABC method of the houses, I see how, because I think what you're saying is Aries belongs to the first house, right? And then Taurus would belong to the second house. You're kind of going in that line of thinking, and
Yes.
that's a very modern way of looking at it, and it kind of boxes in the houses.
Okay.
It boxes in the signs, and it makes them kind of in these cookie cutter significations where, yes, I see it. I see how it would fit, and I see how you could shoehorn all of them in there, but it doesn't. It's not a thing in traditional astrology. We throw that out immediately. The first thing that I tell my students, we're getting rid of the ABC method, and we're going to learn the significations of the houses just as they are.
I like where you're going with this, because we'd be stuck looking at charts thinking that a chart was only natural if somebody's rising sign was Aries, and then everything
Correct.
lined up cookie cutter, right? But that's going to be a few individuals, relatively speaking. But it's not to say that anything else is unnatural. And I'm glad to hear you expand on that.
Yeah, every rising sign is perfect as it is, and it's more about where all your planets fall based on how the rising sign dictated the house, because you can have open houses which have no placements in them, and that doesn't mean that there's no meaning to them. It just means you have to delineate it in a little bit different of a way. But if you have an open fifth house, that doesn't mean you won't have children. It doesn't mean that at all. Or if you have an open seventh house, it doesn't mean you'll never get married. I care more about what is in the house versus, or like, how I take the ruler of that house and where it is and delineate that way.
I have a question on that.
Mm-hmm.
When I look at a chart like my own or friend's partner, an open house, I often wondered if it just meant that there's less to be developed there, or there's less challenge, and therefore maybe less that has to be discovered and understood. Maybe not understood is the right word, but there aren't conflicts or things that fatally one must get into to develop themselves in a way that's going to be fulfilling. Am I on the right track about an empty house, a house with no planet?
Yeah, so I think that's a good way to look at it, is that there's not as much karmic baggage or karmic, numinous content going on in that realm of the person's life. So let's look at, we're going to use Jeff again here. So technically, Jeff's, if we're looking at his 10th house, it's open. It's just the midheavens there. There's no traditional planet or an asteroid there. So that's the sign of Cancer. So where is who rules Cancer? Question quiz. Who rules what's
Moon.
What planet likes to be in Cancer? There we go. Good.
La Luna.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we look at where the moon is. The ruler of the 10th is in the 6th house. So that's going to tell me information about that open house, where the ruler is, what it's doing. And the ruler of the 10th and the 6th, really, that just says, because the 10th house is your role, rank, reputation. It's your public life. It's your persona. So Jeff is going to really, again, want to connect with people in a very lunar way, but also being in the 6th house, service to others, being known for being someone who can help and be kind of a, I don't want to say like the mothering archetype, but be someone who they go to and feel comfortable and relaxed and really kind of just get to the inner core of themselves. You provide a service that allows people to feel relaxed and like they can explore that inner world.
That's my career right there.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I do.
Okay,
that's a great question. Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, that's interesting. Another, so I'm letting go of the inverse sign that there's nothing going on there. The empty house, that makes sense. Yeah, just throw it. That's good. That's good. I love it. And then I guess another point of tension for me I've thought about is this Moon-Mars relationship. And I don't know if there's anything you have to say more about that? I know you mentioned something earlier.
I mean, I personally love Mars, but I'm a very Mars ruled person. If you can't tell, I'm very in your face and intense about things. I'm very, very fiery individual. So when I see Moon and Mars together, sometimes it can be as simple as an overbearing mother or an aggressive mother. It can be that the moon is the mother or the feminine archetype in astrology. The sun is usually the father. We can also put Saturn in there as well. So it could have been there's tensions with female or just a mothering person. And that's just if you're not even looking at it from a psyche perspective, but as a fate perspective,
Yeah.
An aggressive mother archetype.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So what I hear you saying is that the kind of fighting, willing to fight, maybe aggressive, maybe a dynamic interaction aspect of Mars at a fate level would be interacting with the feminine or the nurturing relationships. And so there would be tension, adversity, or conflict in those zones.
Yes. And then you also have to look at the flavor, which is Pisces. So it might be a little more passive aggressive, might be a little more fighting in the ethereal spiritual world. It might not be an outright, jab, but it's going to be in a Piscean way, which emotional manipulation. It might be
like in the field.
Yes, it's
in the
very
field
twisted.
more. Yeah. I'm pretty sensitive in terms of and my wife will say this, she even starts to feel or think a certain way. And I'm like, I already know it's going down. I already can feel it happening, the conflicts. I'm like, oh yeah. She's like, I barely even did it. I'm like, no, I know it's there.
Yeah, it's an intuitive. The moon likes being in Pisces. It's not domiciled or exalted in by any means, but it likes being there because it can be flowy. In tarot, the moon card actually belongs to Pisces, which I think Cancers get a little upset about that, but it definitely there. No, we can't have Cancer. We can't have Cancer hate. No, they're already coming for people too much. So it's the Pisces and moon. 1 and 1. It really does go well together. It's that dreamy, ethereal, but it's also anxiety, shadows. The moon card in tarot has a lot to do with maybe things you made up in your head. Is it real? Am I really feeling this? Did I make this up? Am I jumping to conclusions on things? Is this shrouded in mystery that it doesn't need to be? So I think Mars, that moon Mars conjunction, can sometimes really drive you to jump to emotional conclusions or to feel like you need to emotionally, be ahead of something in a way.
Yeah, guilty as charged here.
Especially in a work sense, because it's the 6th house. Yeah. So service to others, you're really going to be emotionally charged at work a lot of the time.
I mean, the language I would use for that is I can easily project or infiltrate the idea that it's something I did when things aren't working out. Like there's an emotional, oh, I go to me as source and my feelings rather quickly, I think, which comes along with the sensitivity. Okay, another question I have is this. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say, in Pisces, again, it really likes Venus and Venusian ideals. So anytime that harmony gets cut off, it's going to feel really hard for you. When the balance isn't there, it just sends your emotions.
So
That's
true.
What he calls me.
We talk almost every day. Tobin and I talk almost every day. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're each other's besties.
You're mostly Cancer?
My moon is in Cancer, and it's interesting to have you develop the Piscean moon in Jeff's chart and think about how as men we relate on a certain emotional level most of the time, and I wonder if it's astrologically it can be explained a little bit in the ways in which the watery moons we share aid us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like water. I had a whole discussion with someone the other day about water moons, and I'm just like, I can't with it. I can't with it. It's so much, and you two you're filling each other's cups like constantly, and you're just really on that same like petty water level of things.
Did you say petty or
petty?
I said petty. I said petty. It's because
What do you
water
mean by
signs, that's how
petty?
they get hurt. They get hurt, and
Oh
then it's
yeah,
like,
yeah,
oh,
yeah.
like
Mm-hmm.
how
You mean like I am right
dare?
now?
Yeah, exactly. Because what do you mean by petty? What do you mean?
What? Me?
Yeah, it's exact. And I love the water signs. Like I'm here for them. I love them. But a lot of my clients who are water signs. I'm like, look, what we're gonna do is really uncomfortable because I'm gonna push you out of your comfort zone, and you're gonna have to assert boundaries, which I also know you hate. So it's a lot with water. So water signs have horrible boundaries because what does it do? They set a boundary, you just get into a puddle and go under the door.
Keep moving.
Yeah.
For better or for worse. What's your moon? I forgot.
Aries.
Ah,
Yeah,
fire.
I'm an Aries moon. Yeah, it's all fire. It's fire, fire, fire everywhere in there.
Fire, fire, fire.
Fire.
Fire, fire, fire. Do you want to say anything about Aries moon a little bit, just for people who have more some fire and maybe some air elements and earth, just to kind of like develop this relationship with moon that you're so interested in? Kind of back away from talking about my chart for a minute. Yeah.
So fire moons, you have to worry about being explosive. You have to worry about, the big bubbling emotions. You really have to work on containing that. I always say I live in hyperbole. Again, every day is a good day. Every day is the best day I've ever had. Everything is the best, bigger, badder. It's always on that level. You're always up here constantly. And it's not exhausting because that's just where I live. It's just how I live. So I think for fire moons, it's about finding people who balance you but don't drain you, don't completely douse you in a way, because the fire needs to stay alive because it's your inner core. It is part of your unconscious world. You need that. That doesn't mean water and fire moons can't get along. It just means, I think, when I'm speaking to watery people, I can definitely hurt their feelings a lot of the time. I'm very good at that. I'm good at saying the things, but people are coming to me usually for that. I've learned in my life with what I do that I don't just give like advice off the cuff, because if you're not ready to hear it, I don't want to say it.
Yeah. Talk a little bit more about some of the dynamics of elements between, obviously certain elements kind of cooperate and support each other and other ones challenge each other. And just for people to understand both, like kind of the fate of it, like, oh yeah, this is a hard thing, or you are actually feeling this. There is some dynamic differences. In this case, we're talking about water moons and fire moons, but it spreads throughout the chart, right? It's all these different kinds of dimensions. Yeah.
So everyone, puts fire and air together and water and earth together. And air feeds fire, which is great, but how are you grounding yourself? And then you have water and earth. They're great because earth creates a container for water to feel held. So just between you and Tobin, it's like, okay, Tobin's Mercury, that water Mercury is a place, or that earth Mercury is a place for your water moon to like sit, and he can just listen. I bet he's a really good listener for all of your emotions and the things that you want to say. And he gives like that advice that you need to hear in a very direct but subtle way. So water and earth go well together because, when you water the earth, you nourish it. When you just think elementally in general, again, air feeds fire, so they go well together. But that doesn't mean you can't have something else. I actually like to mix up the elements and see what we can get. When you get fire and water, water could put out fire, but you could also create steam. You could also have a steam powered engine there, and that can be really awesome and really dynamic and fun. Because dynamic, that's why I say harmonic and dynamic, because we don't want to get away from hard or bad. It's dynamic. It needs action.
Yeah.
Even in synastry, I like seeing squares, oppositions, because if it's too easy, why try? If it's too easy, you're just going to sit on the couch and watch Netflix all day and not do anything cool. It's going to be boring and it's going to be easy. You need dynamic things in the chart to cause friction, to get you talking, to get you moving in a relationship. And then another one, let's look at, so we did fire and earth. I really like this one. Yes, fire could completely burn the earth, but what if it's a controlled fire? What if it's like actually literally controlled burns? What if it's like that? Or what if it's being able to take it and create like a hearth that you made in a home? Fire and earth can create a lot of good things if they can come together, and just like all of the elements, water and air, that seems, how do you get those two? A boat on the water, pushing it along. You can get air to fuel water's kind of mind in a way, and not get them to think so emotionally, but even intellectually. So you just have to be creative with.
Yeah, and I like that creative
them.
interaction where you're not just being, as you said earlier, limited by ABC or certain pattern or predictive astrology, that this means this always, and there's ways of interacting with the elements and energies. Do either of you have more? I was going to go towards the day and the night charts and the moon, because we're right there next to it. But anything else before we make that turn?
Yeah, that's great. I'm looking forward to that. I was just going to say, when I was hearing you speak about the way in which combinations like earth and fire, dynamic relationships, water and fire, and I think about. I'm really interested in our potential for growth. And when I see aspects that some people might say, that's got to be really difficult. I think, well, if we're going to accept and acknowledge that it's difficult, that's always the beginning of, acknowledging and understanding where you are is the beginning of learning. Or saying, I don't know, as opposed to, oh yeah, I already know, is the beginning of learning. And so I like this idea that if you apply yourself to it, then maybe you receive benefits over time through effort. And that's kind of my take from what you were saying. And it's a really beautiful way of looking at how we can use astrology to see what it is, that we have to work with, and then accepting that some of these things are going to be difficult, but that there's so much richness if we step in. And we're not afraid, and we are, going to acknowledge our flaws.
Aren't we always like really pumped and proud when we do something hard and we got through it? Isn't that, what happens? And that's kind of the whole journey of life, is continually doing hard things in order to further yourself along, in order to further understand and decode kind of your strand of fate.
Amen. Take us to day and night.
Yeah.
So yeah, what do you want us to know about day and night charts?
One of the things that's interesting in my chart is, and I never really understood the day and night charts, but most of my planets are below the horizon. I think 90% of my chart's under the surface.
If we're going traditional planets, it's everything except Saturn. Everything but Saturn. But Saturn is the ruler of your chart.
Yeah.
Pulling its weight.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it absolutely is. And I can relate that everything but I believe 2 of mine are underneath the chart. But the 2 that are above are extremely important. One is my ruler of the chart in the 9th, and then Jupiter in the 11th, which is a powerhouse annoying placement to me. So it's very annoying. It's in its joy there. It wants to be seen and heard all the time.
Say what it means for you, why you're annoyed with this placement in your own experience. Like, what's hard for you about having this 11th house Jupiter?
Because like you were saying, most of my placements are underneath the horizon line, which that creates someone who is typically more, I don't want to say introverted, but more so private, because everything is happening below the horizon line, which above the horizon line is your public life, below is your personal life. I love talking to people about life and things, but usually it's directed at them, not at me. I think I do a fairly decent job at trying to be open with my life experiences, because that's how I tell others, like, I've been there, I can relate, I can help you through things. But at the same time, it's, my Jupiter is always I'll complain having to go to the party, but then once I'm there, I won't leave. I'm the last to burn out, always. The whole time there, I'm telling my husband, I don't want to go to this. I don't want to do this. Like, this is going to be so stupid. I don't want to do this. And then I get there. You can't get me off the dance floor. You can't get me to stop. It's like the wheel has been spun, and it's here we go. So it's a pain.
Expand.
Yes,
Don't stop.
always. Yes, everybody, like more the merrier. Like I'm, people you don't know, like this is great. This is wonderful. We're all vibing together right now. Like and then it's, crash and burn later. So that's why it's annoying for me personally.
Okay. Sounds actually kind of cool.
It's fun. But again, I think podcasting also was the perfect media for me because I can just be like this disembodied voice that travels with people, but I never really have to like be there actually.
Yeah, nice.
I like the story because it makes me think about how all of us have certain inhibitions in certain parts of our lives, but there's always a key, or usually it seems like there's also a key to unlocking those inhibitions. And then once they're unlocked, like we couldn't see how much we would enjoy something or how free we would feel until it has opened. Up until then, we're just resisting and being dragged and complaining. Not so much fun to be around.
I have very little inhibitions. Very little. So I know once I go, it's like, this is not, it's like Pandora's box. It's out. It's done.
Yeah.
I can't stop it.
Is that Mars? Is that Mars being the ruler of your chart that makes you uninhibited?
That's part of it as well.
Yeah.
My Mars is also retrograde, which it's funny. The ruler of your chart is also retrograde in the 9th house. It's just the other malefic. Retrograde planets is the simplest way to say it is the energy is kind of turned inward on self. You're probably really hard on yourself, like never good enough, extremely critical. What you
Often.
do. Yeah, it's very, and it's internalized. It's something that you're not very outward about it. With close people, yes, but it's this very heavy weight that you carry inside that is about, wanting to be better and good and a good communicator. And you might be someone who's always like, I should have said this in the moment, or I should have done this better. I could have edited this better, or just anything. Could have done anything better.
That is absolutely true. And maybe this is good to add in here. One of the things I found myself realizing recently, and this might explain some of the emotions in my life right now, but I realized, like, what would it be like for me to just take my life ultra seriously? Take every day with the kind of intensity and being really serious about it. And one thing I realized is like, yeah, I don't always necessarily do that. I think I have some maybe defenses or other modes. Maybe it's the Venetian fade of Libra, but it felt like a key for me. Speaking of what you said, Tobin, like a key to unlocking things. And so I'm just placing that insight into myself and my life right next to this ruler, Saturnian ruler of my chart. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. It's funny. People who have Saturnian or Capricorn versus Sagittarius energy have a real tough time, I will say. And your Jupiter is domiciled. So you have this want and desire to be, again, free bohemian, do whatever, just kind of go with things. And things work out because a well-placed Jupiter, things just work. It's one of those things. You could pretty much try anything and it's going to happen for you. Good luck. It's just part of the fate. Yeah, good. It's a good luck thing. I have it. Jeff, I know you have it because you have the domiciled Jupiter, but you stand in your own luck. You stand in the way of your own luck. And that might be a difference between me and you, whereas you feel like if you didn't work for it, you don't deserve it. Whereas I'll take it. I'll walk through any door. I always say you shouldn't walk through all the doors, but I'm walking through them.
Yeah.
So here I am.
Yeah. Well, this gets into the resistance, and it gets into the malefic aspect of Saturn, where I do feel like I have a very strong like limitation on what I allow myself to do. And I have to work through myself quite a bit, even though I feel these big ass potentials of communication and expression and big ideas that like I've been sitting on a host of big ideas for a while, and it's just really hard for me to get to the place where I can um, be in it, be out with it, or be it, which gets into the other part of my story this year, which might be showing up in the chart. And this connects to the Pluto transits if they matter at all, but I feel like my whole first 50 years of my life has been Pluto transits across. And I don't know if that matters to you, but I do know that for myself, one of the things I'm learning right now, or one of the teachings that came to me this summer, is I have lots of pathos, lots of empathy, but it's time for me to shift more towards mythos and more expansive and maybe above the horizon kind of expression, which has been difficult for me to, be out of the clinic, be out of that intimate space of healing, helping people, serving people. And I definitely find myself in that transition and that conversation with lots of Capricornian Saturn encounters along the way. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does make sense to me. The ruler of your chart, the master of the nativity, as it's called in traditional astrology, that it's the master's agenda. No matter what else you have going on, it is that planet's agenda. And yours is in the ninth house, which is a very visible house. It's the house of philosophy, astrology, spirituality, just governing yourself, your higher ideals, all of that. So that's going to be extremely important. Now, you do have to balance your Jupiterian energy with your Saturnian energy, and that just takes work. Yes, I am a very freewheeling person because I have a lot of the Sagittarius energy. But remember, I told you I have that domiciled Saturn. And the way I do it is I allow myself to take opportunities, but I'm also very structured. People are very surprised at how structured I am for all of the fire. And it's using it to be constructive rather than critical. You need to take your Saturnian energy and not be so critical of yourself, and rather be constructive with yourself. Give yourself guidelines to follow and rules to follow and things that you must do. And that will appease the Saturnian energy while allowing you to have this influx of, all these ideas and aspirations that you have, and allowing Jupiter to really thrive. So it's appeasing both of, the gas giants, so to speak.
And that's the gift of the Saturnian energy, right?
Yes. I'm a very oddly regimented person, despite everything else, despite of like the spontaneity that I love so much and the freewheeling. And that's being able to look at your astrology and say, okay, I have this. It could be a damper on me, but it's not. I regiment myself in a way that allows for spontaneity, that gives me the option to choose it should I need it. And I think you can do that too, Jeff. I think it's going to be, you have a while yet till your second Saturn return, because Saturn is in Pisces right now. But I think when that happens is when you're going to see the big sort of push towards that outward energy coming out, being more outward with your energy.
Since you are upfront and you're interested in fate, and we've been talking about my chart, I want to invite any things that you see to help me get past my kind of Libran harmonious thing and get more real about what you see in my chart in relationship to my fate.
So what it sounds like you're asking, like potentially like shadow work, like what can I do? Shadow work's a big buzz term. But we need to work with shadows in order to sometimes move ourselves along. And the first place I look for shadows or wisdom is Chiron, the wounded healer. So I love Chiron, great placement. You have yours in the 7th house. So it's making a lot of aspects to a lot of different placements. And it even aligns with one of your strongest placements in your chart. The most exact traditional placement, where it's 2 traditional planets, is Saturn trine Venus. So actually Saturn trining Venus tells me that there's a subduing that needs to be done, taking Venusian ideas more seriously, like allowing yourself to kind of give them guidelines and not be so hedonistic or bohemian with your Libran energy. But back to Chiron in the 7th house, how have your relationships been? Like your close, intimate relationships?
I would say like good and at times hard. The the biggest challenge I think I have in my family system of origin or in my current one is when I lose a sense that I feel like I belong or I feel at home in things. And because I have that kind of sensitivity of the moon, like that's where the challenge comes in for me, feeling like safe and rooted in myself in a family system, whether that's
Yeah.
fathering or husbanding or yeah.
And I was going to bring up the more masculine part of this wound just because it's in Aries. So that's Aries is the emperor, he's the king, you know. This is the one where you might have a wound around masculine energy in a sense, or being an effective leader in your relationships and in a relationship dynamic.
For me, that showed up with my relationship with my father. In terms
Okay.
of if you're talking about where do I have a father wound? The answer would be yes.
Yes.
And in terms of, but father healing too. So it's not just one sided, but I definitely had it. And there was dynamics. I grew up with three brothers, you know, and so my dad took a kind of quasi, sometimes militaristic kind of approach to managing the household when he was there. So there was this kind of extreme intensity between being really intense, like, well, speaking of Mars, like my dad was like a gun owner, you know, like lots of guns when he passed away. Right. So, so yeah, that aspect of the deep mistrust I felt with the way he displayed aggression in the family system was absolutely a wound. And then that's impacted my relationships with my brothers, three of them, and my sister to some degree, but she was from my dad's second marriage, in ways that are very much in that kind of masculine journey. And the position I took, being the third of the four boys, was kind of interesting because I basically, you know, relatively, I'm like the black sheep of the family in terms of where I position myself politically or what my interests are, and you know, holism or counterculture, all those kind of things. Yeah.
Yeah, and you even say like the word militant. That's an Aries word. That is 100%. Yeah, it's Tobin. You know, it's very much like that's the Aries way to be militant, and that can be good. You can be militant in things and still be positive, but you know, it seems like it was more the unpreferred expression of Aries, which is always hard. But like you said, your Chiron, yes, it's a wound, but there's a lot of healing to be gained. That's why I love Chiron. It's not just wounds, it's wisdom from them as well. And it can help you inform how you raise children, how you want to be in your relationships, how you want the person you want to be, and how you want to relate to your aggression. And having Mars moon, it's just going to be an eternal, you know, learning experience of how you relate to your aggression and going through an outburst and then coming back and being like, okay, I can do that differently next time, or holding something in too long and then being like, okay, I need to relieve the pressure much sooner next time. It's not that, you know, you're doomed to be this way, because once you have the awareness of it, it's now your responsibility to work with it. So that's what astrology is. Don't come to me unless you want to become aware of things and then be responsible for working on it, because you can't say you didn't know anymore. Let's see. I'm going to look at your chart. So you have Juno in the first house, and it's not super conjunct your ascendant, but it is close to Uranus. So to me, that's big on marriage or your commitment. First, Juno in the first house in general, your marriage is your identity, and you are a Libra rising. So you are someone who mirrors others as a form of like affection. It's just a thing that we do. It's, you know, flattery is the best form, imitation is the best form of flattery kind of thing. You know, you're a mimic in that way sometimes, as I am. If your partner is doing something, you want to be doing it. You know, it's very matchy in that way for Libra risings. So when you have Juno in the first house, that doubles down even more that your marriage, your relationship, and even relationships of the past, they become your identity. They're very core to you, which can be hard because you can lose your sense of self rather quickly if it's with someone who doesn't complement who you actually are. Yes, is this true?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's interesting. My wife's in Aries, among other things. We both have grand trines. Alice is in Aries, so it's really interesting to kind of go. I'm very very connected and identified with the marriage and our journey. And I also find that kind of the Aries, different styles. And I would probably go more towards the moon aspect of it, like that sensitivity of my moon with that more Aries, and maybe some of my past healing hurts and wounds around that probably are my learning challenges and how to work with those in the marriage.
And you're going to love Aries people in general, whether it's to your advantage or not, because we have that seventh house. The seventh house is what you encounter a lot of. And especially if you do have placements in there, like I have my natal moon is in the seventh house. So I just adore other Aries moons and Aries placements. And I love that. And you're going to as well. So the fact that your wife is an Aries does not surprise me at all, because there should be something usually, because it's the house of marriage, So I'm not surprised at all that there is synastry going on there. It doesn't have to. There's a bunch of other ways it can work out, but a lot of the times I will see people where in their synastry with their spouse or whoever they're in a relationship with, they'll have seventh house placements. But your Juno really does say that it becomes your identity. And there's nothing wrong with that. Again, I'm Libra rising, I get it. But your Juno is very much like, and also being so close to Uranus, there's something foundational shaking. Like your marriages and your deep commitments really change you, and it can be abruptly, or you have abrupt changes within the marriage. There's things that, because Uranus is the great disruptor. So there's something that is very disrupting to your sense of self that happens within marriage.
Yes, that's true. And I think it's more on the emotional side. Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense emotionally for me. That I have like very like disruptive, like strong feelings, sensitive feelings that are there. Yep.
And you are a night chart, which we touched on that briefly, but you're a night chart. So you're going to actually feel a lot closer to your moon and Pisces rather than Capricorn.
I like the dialogue that you guys are having right now a lot. And I feel your vulnerability, Jeff, because it makes me think of the ways in which I see you. And it's like, it's so spot on. When you are, it's so spot on.
You're being very stoic about it, though. You're being very stoic.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's so true that the way in which you identify with partnership and connections to others means that when you're feeling in the flow and connected and engaged, seen, you are high as a kite. You express it, and you let people like me know that you're in the groove. And when you fall out and you feel disharmonious, it's heavy. It's got a weight. And the great thing from where I stand is that you'll explore both places and write about it in poetry and really expand on what it's like to be in and outside the warm thing. And it's a way I think that you do figure out how to navigate being here and not like some people just kind of running very consistently most of the time. So
it's good. It's honest. It's true.
And so to expand on your vulnerability, but also to engage the other side of this equation is, we talked a lot about what this show can be for viewers and interested astrologers and students of astrology. And one of the questions I just wanted to get in before we go, I don't have a lot more time personally, but to bring it back around, I think what I've been pondering lately for myself is, how do I invite more people in my life to explore astrology with me? I have some of my own ideas, but with you on the show today, I thought it was a great chance to say, how would you start beyond sun signs to really lure somebody in a nice way to become more fascinated with not only understanding themselves through astrology, but also maybe how they relate to the harder dynamics in their life, work, family, relationship to me, and keep it simple enough that you can start to integrate the complications as you go.
I don't know if you'll like this answer, but I wouldn't.
Okay.
It's one of those things where throughout my time as a teacher and in this role, I've always, and maybe it's different because I'm taking on the teaching role, it's not a personal thing. I just let people come when they're ready. And the best thing I can do is live it. So, I've been a vegan for 10 years. I'm not the vegan that's out there in the streets screaming or telling people you shouldn't do this, but I rather I live and I let people watch how happy I am and how excited I am for life. And they say, like, at some point it comes up in conversation. I say, well, I do these practices, I do these things. And then you introduce it organically rather than lure them in, rather than try to like bait them into something that they don't know what they're doing. Because if they're not ready for it, they're just going to use it in a way that I wouldn't want someone to use it anyway. I want someone to come to it when they're ready. And honestly, in this lifetime, maybe they're not going to come to it. My Buddhist perspective says that I'm not here to force anybody to do anything. I'm here to just live authentically and allow my existence to hopefully be a beacon where other people want to live the same. But if you want to, you can just tell people, like, this has helped me. Just be honest. Just be like, this really helps me understand myself in a better way. And then if they're interested, they're interested. People always want to hear about themselves, right? Like they always want to hear about themselves. That's us as humans. We're little creatures that want to know more about ourselves, but don't want to do the work to know more about ourselves. So you can just say, this has really helped me discover more about me. And I think, it could be interesting to look at this together.
That's great validation, because I think in the last 6 months or so, people have been noticing that this is becoming, I'm getting more serious about it. And I've had, another friend come and say, what are you going to say about me when I'm gone? Like, as if that could happen. I don't know that. But
yeah.
Like, through the astrological lens. And I started to say a little bit about his rising sign and things that he'd not thought about. And he was just his mouth dropped. He was like, wow, this sounds exciting. Now, whether he'll go with it or not, like you said, I'm going to try not to be attached to that.
Yep. Yes.
But in that moment, I was very excited. That could be good enough.
It is just having that little seed planting and knowing, like, well, it's theirs to take care of now. And if they need me, they'll come find me again.
Dalanah, it's been so great to have you on the show today. Thank you for all the wisdom, the insight, the willingness, the energy to join Tobin and myself. And Tobin, it's been great to have you here. It's been so fun. Thank you for your wisdom and insights and your curiosity.
Tobin's been a great palate cleanser for the both of us.
I had no idea what I was signing up for, but I am so glad that this worked out. And it's been delightful. Thank you so much.
And don't think your astrological, your planet shirt fell short on me, because I noticed.
And so for people to find you, Dalanah, I know you have a lot of offerings, and just, what would you like to say about that?
Yeah, you can't find me on social media because I think it's a hell realm. So I don't have that, but you can go to my website and you can send me a message there. I'm pretty open to talking to people. Yeah, that's pretty much it. You can only go to my website and maybe just like send a wish into the air and maybe I'll catch it. So that's about it.
But everybody should listen to your podcast as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, my website is Moon Matters Astrology, by the way. Horrible at marketing myself. I just let Jupiter do that. Jupiter does all the work for that. Thank you guys. This was wonderful.